Okay, good morning. I'm Amy Law, I'm from MachineMax. I've spent 15 years looking at diggers. That's basically my life. My proudest accomplishment is that my children can spot the difference between a dozer, an ADT and an excavator. And the other day when we were driving down the road, my eldest said, "Mummy, that ADT looks like it's a funny angle. Do they have one of those things?" She meant an inclinometer. So this is my life, surrounded by yellow equipment. So I've landed at MachineMax. We were also founded in 2018, so we're scale up too. We're 100% owned by Shell Ventures. And our job, our purpose is to take data from construction equipment and understand what it's doing, where it is, if it's active, if it's being productive. And a big benefit of this is that we can help companies to become more sustainable in their approach to managing their equipment. Questions, if anybody wants to scan? Okay, and don't forget to hashtag Comet 2024. So, I'm not going to read these out because they're a bit depressing, but essentially the reason that I think it's good to highlight these metrics is because what they represent is pressure. It's pressure to change, it's pressure to do things differently, and one of the kind of straightforward wins or opportunities is that construction, and we also work in mining and aggregates, but we're talking about construction today, is that these industries are going through huge periods of digitization. There's lots and lots of really clever technology that affords opportunity to change. And what that means is that we've got a myriad now of kind of IoT, software solutions that all have really good intention, ourselves included. And it's just about realizing the actual benefit of using data in these industries to make changes so that these metrics actually start to shift. And typically, what we hear a lot about is BIM, and of course we do. It's really important. It's the foundation of a project. It's the early stages of modelling and understand what's going on. But in our experience, where things aren't necessarily thought out from a data perspective, it's the end-to-end data flows, the kind of short and medium-term digital approach on a construction site as it's getting going. So that, for us, is things like how we're connecting the site. So this brings us on to the next thing that gets talked about a lot, is connected site. And from a MachineMax perspective, the connected site is about understanding machinery. And as we get older and more mature as a company, it's only natural that we start to bring in information about people, not who they are, but where they are, what they're doing, and also the material that gets moved around site. And that's really important, because if we can't see that, then we can't start to create the digital twins that we're talking about. And if we don't have really good, accurate data from the machines that are doing lots of the work on our sites, then as we start to build AI, machine learning, and digital twins, the adage, if you put rubbish in, you get rubbish out, becomes really true. So, do we just connect everything and start generating data? And to a certain extent, this is a little bit what's going on at the moment in construction, is we've got data everywhere. It's almost like there's data fatigue and data blindness. And so our argument is that we need to go back to ask the really important questions before we start generating data. And I was listening to a podcast yesterday that said that at the moment, data centers are using 1% of global electricity or energy. And by 2030, they predict that they will be using 47%. So data has a cost, not just in terms of money, but also in terms of carbon or GHG. So we have to understand why we need data, what we're going to do with it, and who's going to use it before we start collecting it. And that, for us, is what makes a successful connected site. It's something where we've thought about who wants to use this data, what problem are we solving, and there's a constant internal battle at MachineMax between our sales team and our product team, where sales say, we're going to do this for a customer, they need these sensors and they need this subscription, and our product team goes, but why? Why do they need that? What are they trying to solve? Because if you don't have that rigor at the start of a project, then actually what you end up with is data that you don't really need and that you're not using. And the benefits are broad and talked about. McKinsey do lots of really good reports. We all know that it's important that we use data to drive efficiency, sustainability, productivity, and ultimately this also leads to safety improvements. So how do we know this? This is one of our case studies from last year. So we worked with Costain on a section of an M6 Smart Motorways project. And I think it's really important here to think about scale, is that this was a 3-month proof of concept with about 16 machines. But what we did first was to baseline their machine data. So construction equipment generally in the UK won't be that old. Most major clients mandate that machinery is sort of less than 3 years old. So we're getting data from OEMs. And part of what MachineMax does, we work with 36 different OEMs now to bring data in on an API. That's great, but the data standard is a little bit weak. And there's been lots of talk about consistency of data over the last couple of days, so I'm not going to get on my soapbox. But what that tells us is the amount of machine idling that we're seeing. So we're seeing whether machines are on or active, and when they're on, whether they're active doing something that is productive or doing something that is unproductive. We deployed some sensors because we noticed that we couldn't really tell where this idling was happening, and we couldn't tell what time it was happening. So we had very little context to help us to change what was happening on site. So with very simple hardware, so 15 minutes install, we could then see in real time where the idling was happening. And then from a data perspective, we could see if there was consistencies across the time that was happening. And as a result of this, we reduced their idling from 50% and we reduced it by 37%. So for context, that's about 3,500 litres of fuel for that project a month, which is about a tonne of carbon. So there's huge opportunity. So sounds great, right? So when we're looking at connecting people, plant and machineries, there's a few issues that we come up against. One of them being that our industry is really fragmented. So we have project owners, we have main contractors working for them, and then we have subcontractors who own the equipment in the main. So the people whose machines are generating the data are not the same people who can benefit from the data or make the change. And that's an issue. And then, I touched on this earlier, but there is a lack of standardization. So Supply Chain Sustainability School did some research a couple of years ago. They think that around 2 million tonnes of carbon is emitted from construction equipment in the UK a year, while machines are idling, doing nothing on site. So it's completely unnecessary. And yet, the information that comes as part of a standard subscription from an OEM does not give you the real-time information on where it's happening. So going back to our Costain case study, I'm not going to say it's bad data, because that's not true. It's really useful to see equipment utilisation and equipment idling, but we need a more granular level of data to really make impact. So great for baselining, but if we want to do something, we need a little bit more information. The OEMs also report idling differently, so people have different idling limits. So some say a machine's idling after 3 minutes, some say after 5 minutes. Quite often you can change those yourself, including in our platform. So a contractor might choose to set it at 5, and then they might increase that or reduce it depending on how they want their metrics to look. So I think as an industry, we need to start looking at standards and what we're expecting, because then we're measuring apples with apples or dozers with dozers. So how can we deliver the data at the right time? One, and this comes back to what I said at the start, it's understanding who needs the data and what decisions they're trying to make. And I think it's also about, I'm going to skip forward to this one, understanding data flows and how actually if you look at something quite focused like equipment, the data, so this is a data flow that we use, this is about equipment, and you can see that at the source we've got what's going on with our machinery on site, but it can help teams across a project. So quite often a use case for us outside of kind of efficiency and sustainability is finance teams who are looking to understand kit coming on and off hire and whether invoicing is accurate. It's about cost allocation because machines are working in specific geo-fenced areas. So by understanding the questions that you're asking and understanding who's going to use that data, you can really start to spread the benefit. The next thing that we're quite passionate about at MachineMax is about how you collect and ingest this data. So are we sharing? Are we collaborating? We're, in theory, a small part when we look at equipment. So who can we give our data to, or what data can we bring in to provide context? And making sure that's easy for our end users to do. It's also where we're talking about IoT, having solutions, sensor solutions that are easy to install, that are flexible, especially bearing in mind the large rental equipment providers that we have in the UK who have equipment moving around all the time. So we need systems that are easy for everyone to use and engage with. And then we need to use machine learning and AI. So our idling and machine activity models are built on data and they're improving all the time. So we're looking predominantly at kind of three numbers. So we're looking at vibration, we're looking at GPS to see movement, and we're looking at voltage from engine on and off where we have a wired-in device. And that means that our data models are constantly evolving to learn what is actually a machine idling and what is actually a machine doing something productive. We think that we then need to create these data ecosystems, and this a little bit goes back to the data flow slide, but understanding what metrics we're collecting in these ecosystems, where that data is coming from, and how we're going to give people access to it so that it's easy. I heard twice yesterday that 35% of construction workers' time is spent searching for data, which is another scary statistic. But how do we make sure that we have open systems where people know where to find the data? And this kind of leads on to this tailored analysis piece. So I talk to quite a lot of customers, and it's a bit of a problem because we are IoT and we are SaaS, and they really they look at you and they're like, oh no, you're one of those people. I don't want to see you. We don't need another platform. We've got loads that we don't log into. So where can we put the data that's useful? Do they need a report? Do they need an API into a system that they're already comfortable using? We'd love everyone to use our platform. We think it's great. But the reality is that's not always the case for people. Or do they need real-time alerts? So if we're pulling in real-time data, is it actually more beneficial if a machine is idling or if it's in an unsafe place to tell them at the time, whether that's by WhatsApp, an email to a site manager or a black hat? So we need to have that kind of flexible approach to how we're delivering data. And we think that if you do this, and going back to Costain, our success story, but we're also working with a couple of HS2 JVs who are also doing really good work. If we underpin our decisions with data and we give data to the right people, then we will empower them to make changes. So machine idling is a habit. It's just something that's always happened. And if we can baseline that and give it to a black hat, and then we can deliver eco-operator training, which lots of our rental partners have really good eco-operator training programs, then they can use data to explain the problem, they can show where they're at the moment, and then they can create operator league tables on a monthly basis to keep that engagement. And then you get the behavioural change. So, in conclusion, I feel like I've whistled through that, sorry, I'm probably talking really fast. I think what our kind of takeaway is that what we really need is agreement across the industry on what our data standard is. What do we need to measure? What's important? And how can we make that fair so that everybody can share it, so that we can all know that we're comparing things? And also, how can we share this data so that the people generating the data are giving it to the people that can use it to do something and make a change? And yeah, that's it.